What is happening? Whoa, my friends. I don't know how I clicked that button, but hey, I'm Robin Black. We're hanging out. I'm hanging out with two buddies. Sometimes it'll be more, but usually it'll be the three of us. Hey, listen, I don't know where you're watching from. I know we're hanging out on Black Belt magazine, and I know we're hanging out at Sport Martial Art and a bunch of different places. I'm going to introduce Mallory and Rich in just a second. This is our first. We just called this For Love of Martial Arts. That's a working title. Hopefully you can help us come up with something else. But currently, there's a lot of people talking about martial arts. It's a wonderful thing. By the way, what is this? What is this? What is this? It's a podcast. It's a podcast with our friends. What isn't it? We're not going to talk about necessarily current affairs, who's mad at who, what Jake Paul did, or which matchups we think have the best striker versus grappler narratives. None of that shit. We're just going to hang out with some friends and talk martial arts, and let's introduce them. I don't know if Mallory wants to make them bigger, but this is my friend Mallory. Mallory is a lifelong martial artist. He's a tech dude, and he's a comic book nerd and a superhero. He thinks like a tech person, martial artist, etc. This is my friend Rich. Maybe we can make Rich bigger here. Rich was matchmaker for Bellator. Holy shit, Rich, you're so big. Rich is a lifelong martial artist, brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's working with Wimp to Warrior. My friend, how are you?
I'm fantastic. A little nervous as well, as I don't know what I've gotten myself into, but that's the exciting part of all this, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you and I hang out and talk about martial arts weekly, usually. So this should literally just be that, right? Like martial arts is a fascinating thing, and it's consumed, talked about, and shown a particular way over the last 4 or 5 years. But that's not the only way.
Yeah, we've spent time before the watch parties, but obviously that's right. Very weird. There's a theme behind it, and as you know, we geek out, as you mentioned, all the time on everything, martial art and fighting. You know, we talked about, I guess, freestyling, and I see this as an open mat session. You know, it's a flow roll. We're flowing. We're gonna, as Hickson would say, go. Flow with the go, and let's see where it takes us.
I dig it. And like I said, we're on Black Belt magazine because we all grew up on this shit for sure, right? Like, I mean, there you go. We'll definitely look at this as a topic. But before I introduce Mallory, this is something we want to talk about. And this Rich and I have talked about this, and Mallory and I have talked about this. Martial arts. We think of it often, if you consume a lot of commercial fighting, it looks a particular way. But you're seeing, and this will give me a good chance to introduce Mallory, we're seeing sort of traditional martial arts have a bigger and bigger and bigger role in mainstream fighting. Mallory, you're a Taekwondo black belt, and you competed in sport karate. Dude, talk to me.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because going back to, obviously, on a lot of people's minds, there's the mixed martial arts element of this. And of course, the idea behind mixed martial arts was, let's get everybody together that's this style, and let's see what happens. Let's kind of see where this whole thing goes. And then for a while, someone, there was a whole topic of, do traditional martial arts work in the modern era of mixed martial arts, and everybody training a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And a lot of that has been proven. Yes, it does, with fighters like Wonder Boy. You got Raymond Daniels is out there. And these guys were traditional martial artists from the beginning. In sport karate, there are a lot of different tournaments that are out there. Obviously, before pre-pandemic, there were many tournaments around the world. There were, you get all these great athletes, and techniques that are old, as to go to talk about that topic, are quote unquote old, are new again. People are using those again. When was the first time you saw someone get hit with a sidekick in MMA? And people all of a sudden look at it like, wow, this is a new technique. No, it's been around since people were punching and kicking.
So, Rich, like as long as, when did you take your pro fight, or you had a couple of pro fights? When was that, Rich? 2003, 4?
2002, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
So
is that 19 years ago now?
back, things that you were training back then now will seem new to people who all train, fight, practice, spar, what they believe is the current way. So, and this is a thought that comes up a lot. What we call mixed martial arts now was at one time the taking of all these other things and saying karate thinks it knows what's up, and karate is just a bunch of belief systems that may or may not work. Kung fu thinks it believes this, but the current commercial fighting, what we call mixed martial arts, is actually doing that itself. You see guys, if you go into a lot of MMA gyms, you'll see guys training the same particular way that they believe works, and a lot of these old techniques actually are popping up again.
I definitely agree with you on that. Make sure Richard's still with us, making sure he didn't have any audio problems.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're seeing it, as you mentioned. It was the era of the, it was the purist. The purists got this all going, right? Mm-hmm. Style versus style, mm-hmm. that eventually blended and morphed into what we know now as modern MMA. And I'm always fascinated to see where these great, some of the greats, what their foundation is, and to see what they added and how, what they added and stacked and built on top of that foundation. And then we're seeing this modern era where they don't have, they're just jumping into MMA, right? They don't have a particular discipline to start with. So I'm constantly analyzing that. I'm fascinated by it. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Maybe it's just me where I'm at in this stage in my life. Call it a midlife crisis, call it whatever. But I feel just so I'm just gravitating towards the old school, towards the old stuff. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, we do see it popping up again, and perhaps that's kind of what's feeding that as well. Like, it's not gone. Why am I thinking about it? And why is it a little more interesting to me? Like, don't get me wrong, the level today of MMA competition is the highest it's ever been, for sure. Yeah. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about creativity, imagination, things that got me interested in martial arts, and in particular, my favorite martial art of jiu-jitsu. I love the fact that, to this day, somebody could have created a new setup, a new move, a new technique this morning, anywhere in the world. It's possible. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You really can't say that about a lot of martial arts, even, or, other disciplines or activities or passions. It's like you hit a certain level where you really can't. Can you invent a new punch in boxing?
You can reinvent how you think, and and martial arts is a manifestation of belief, right? Why do we punch like this? Because I believe it works, right? I believe it because I saw it, because I tried it, because I learned it, because I did it and it worked. But ultimately, it's a mechanization of what I believe to be true, right? You mentioned that if you were a 15-year-old kid now, your style is MMA. And that actually, I think, as somebody who views martial arts kind of holistically, that's limiting. That MMA has become a style, and style is always the problem. Whether we're talking about Bruce Lee, and Mallory, you're going to have some thoughts on this, I know. Whether we're talking about Bruce Lee and in the 70s, or any number, the progressive nature of martial arts gets to the point that logically having a style is the problem. Because if I have a style, that means I have particular belief systems. Those belief systems are expressed. My opponent knows what they are. Then eventually the opponent will go and exploit them. Mal, what's your thoughts?
Well, that was it. You mentioned Bruce Lee, and that is kind of what he specifically thought of. One of the reasons he came up with his style was because he thought the older styles were too limited, they were too rigid. You can see that in terms of traditional martial arts when you break down a punch is a punch is a punch versus, wait a minute, a punch from a boxer stance is the same as a punch from a front stance, except the feet are a little bit closer. You're holding your hands a little bit different. You're not sunk down into a complete front stance. But in that way, it really makes me think that that's an evolution. It's an evolution. It's a change, taking the things that work, maybe looking at them different, not just doing them because they are traditional. And that's the end of the topic. Why do we do this? It's tradition. No more discussion. Why not change it? Why not, tweak this, make it a little bit better, make it faster?
So when I throw a jab,
Mm-hmm.
and when we discuss martial arts now, and well, these things, and this is something when we all nerd out that we talk about, I think some of our audience, and there's a bunch of people hanging out with us, which is super cool. You know that anybody hanging out with a brand new podcast with a bunch of nerds that call it for love of martial arts because they don't know what to call it, you're our people, right? But when we say a jab, and I'm doing my job, if I'm talking about Bellator or One or the UFC or whatever, I may say his boxing ... But there's a jab in karate. And when I train Muay Thai, my Muay Thai instructor teaches me to throw a jab. All of that is nonsense. Ultimately, it's a physical expression of what is the creative expression of what I need to do. I'm gathering information and data, and I need to get my motor cortex to express emotion. I'm in danger, or I'm trying to initiate something. I throw my hand in this way. You can call it boxing if you want, or you can call it kung fu if you want, but all of those are just words. They almost have nothing to do with the reality of what we're doing.
I think, well, first of all, shout out to everyone. This is a total X-Files moment. We are not alone. So who's Mulder, who's Scully? I'll let the people out there decide. But really cool to see that there are other people who are passionate like us, and also perhaps experiencing the same kind of thought process right now, right? Where you're just kind of your imagination and creativity. I'm going to go back to those two, because again, those are the two that did it for me. That's why I'm here. That's what got me to fall in love. Just breaking boundaries and just thinking about all these things that were possible. The approaches, like you said, to throwing a punch, the ability to create, all of those things. I'm searching for it again. I love MMA. Do not get me wrong. I love what I do. I love my career. I love, just the last 20 years of being involved in this industry has been a true blessing. So I don't want to sound like somebody grown tired of it, who doesn't respect it, or no, it's amazing. I guess perhaps I'm, every now and then you need to spice up the relationship. You love your wife, you love your girlfriend, but every now and then
you got to change up the menu.
Yeah, you got to mix it up a little bit to find that passion again. And perhaps that's where I'm at with my martial arts journey. I keep looking back to the old school guys. A few weeks ago, I was at Ruka and visiting some of my friends, and Pat Tenore, the founder and a lifelong martial artist and a purist. He's been training a lot with Eric Paulson lately, and just to see him, a old school guy in there. And I just kept, when I see those guys, warning for, all you old school guys out there, if you see me, I'm gonna bug you, and I'm just gonna harass you and just ask you 20 questions. But I just actually just sat there and just listened to him and just took it all in. And I'm still trying to figure out again what I'm going through. But if you're going through it out there, where you're just kind of maybe the older I get, the better it was. I don't know, guys. I'm fascinated, and I'm more intrigued now, more so than ever, by the past, by the old school guys, by the purists, by the and how they all got started. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm not that I don't appreciate or I'm not taking for granted the greatness we see in competition these days. Don't get me wrong, but just sometimes you can only see so much of one guy pushing another guy against the fence, taking him down and throwing elbows on him, and finding out a way to win the sporting contest. Does that all make sense?
100%. So I wrote down a few things that we've talked about sometimes, and this came up, right? And this is, again, I'm going to show you guys a couple of weird articles that are like from the 70s and stuff, and we can chat about them. We'll do this later. Hey, people can like give us advice on who we should bring on and what we should do. One segment definitely is going to be looking at cool old, things and figuring out how they fit into sort of martial arts reality now. But this is something that is, as long as martial arts have existed, it doesn't matter what martial art you've studied. And I would say that music, art, painting, all of these things have elements. This idea of balance has always been a part of it, right? The idea that if I push, I can also pull. If I, wrestling is a very physically aggressive sport, but even in wrestling, there are times where I use non-resistance to make you fly, right? This is the nature of it. And I think maybe this is also what we're talking about on a larger scale, is the idea, if we look at what current fighting is, and again, we're going to say this probably a lot, Rich, you and I, and you too, Mal, we're going to say this a lot. We don't want to be those old farts who just say, fighting was better back in the day.
Right? Well, that would never work back then. Or things
exactly. Right. But at the same time, so we're not saying modern fighting isn't brilliant, but we are saying it has followed a particular path. Now that path is supported by competition, finances, television ratings, all of these wonderful things, but they shape things in a particular way. And if that's the yin of it, with that, we come, okay, we're making money training fighters. So let's train them A, B, C, D. Let's create formulas, ways we run plays when we're up against the fence. Well, if it's particularly athletic, maybe we have to balance it with artistic. If it's particularly commercial, maybe we have to balance it with abstract, right? And these are some of the things that the further we go down a single road, many of us start to say, hey, wait a second, we're being led down a particular path. It's not a negative path. It's just a structured path. And maybe we need some unstructuring. Does that make sense?
Totally. This thought, as you were pontificating there, I was, this thought came to mind of again, going and creating this. It's a sport, right? We've created an environment where, for example, what is one of the most unsatisfying moments for fans I've come to experience in MMA these days is when one guy gets his ass kicked, but yet wins a fight based off position. Right? Or the current scoring system, or just how and again, no knock to the guys again who are in there and doing what they got to do, but you see on one side of the referee, there's a guy that's beaten up and battered and just looks like just dominated, and then on the other side, a guy's fresh, visibly frustrated, and then the guy's hand, the guy who's beat up and worse for wear gets his hand raised, and fans are just like, oh, what a shitty decision, and it's backwards. How can that even happen? And yeah, that's where you took something like the name of the game, fighting martial arts, was to defend yourself and to, if you had to hurt somebody without taking damage and getting hurt yourself. So when you see that play out differently in the sporting world, that's where I find the fans get the most frustrated. Is like, what is this? This guy went in there, did absolutely, nothing to hurt his opponent, took all the big shots, and yet, you wouldn't want to be that guy out on the street, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right. That guy won? Are you kidding me? I would not. Hey, if that's winning, then I don't want to win. If you're out on the street or in a
It would be if you showed both people, you would say that look at these two guys and you tell me who won the fight. You look at picture person A and picture person B, and you'll say, well, this guy won. He took no damage and everything. Oh, actually, the guy with all the hematomas and everything else, he won the fight. The way it's kind of tough. Like I especially understand what you mean, Rich, because it's a sport, you have to structure it some way. We have to have some set of rules. We have to kind of limit certain things there, so it can't be a complete free for all that's out there. But yeah, and this is that comment was there's a sports rule don't apply to the street. So if we're that's always a common comment in a lot of dojos or gatherings. Like, okay, that's great, but will it work on the street? Or you can't do that on the street,
This is definitely we're going to have a entire hangout dedicated to this idea at some point for sure. And who knows, maybe we'll bring in a ref or we've got lots of friends through work that are refs and judges. That actually might be really interesting for some people, but try to balance that out and make sense of it. The idea of what is real combat is a really long, winding conversation. What is combat? What is it really? When asked purely from, Robin, what do you think personally? What would you like? I like the idea that there are no rules whatsoever. However, in real life, that's clearly not going to work. Right? We can't actually have that. What I always get to is if there were no rules, biting, eye gouging, groin destruction,
small joint manipulation, etc.,
all that would cease to exist about a year later. Because if you guys are fighting, and anybody watching right now, you are a professional fighter, your entire training would revolve now around how do I never get my eyes gouged out, because that'll ruin my life. So the structure of the martial art itself will change so that in 2026, there's nobody ever gets eye gouged at a high level. The reason we can't have that is because between here and 2026, a lot of people are going to be losing eyes and getting bitten, and we just can't do that as a society, and that's probably a good thing. But this is an interesting conversation.
I have a perfect example of that, and it's definitely recent. Let's go back just a few weeks ago to the Olympics. And I think it wasn't Taekwondo. I think it was the Kumite portion for karate, which was introductory to the Olympics. We had an opponent that was knocked out in the gold medal round. Fantastic technique. It was a roundhouse kick, and the other opponent was knocked out. And they said, well, due to the rules, he actually won. And people are looking like, wait a minute, the guy that won, the guy that was actually knocked unconscious is not. I've seen
is wearing the gold medal.
Is wearing the gold medal, and it's like, okay, hold on. Explain that to me. And it's tough, especially if you're someone that's a layperson who's coming in. Fighting translates to the winner is standing with his or her hands up, and the loser is on a stool, having ice or rendered unconscious. And that didn't make a lot of sense to some people. And
I like that because these moments exist. People are like, this is bullshit. What is this? Why is this? And everybody and people are freaking out. That's good. Because when things are a little weird and things aren't quite making sense, they don't break through strong enough that any normal person can be watching their TV and watching the Olympics and go, that just doesn't make sense to me. Sort of illogical nature of some of these structures that we create. The sports are a structure, broadcasts are a structure, television's a structure, a podcast is a structure. And these structures get weird because they're no longer pure art.
By the way, fellas, since we're talking rules, the concept that I've always found funny and intriguing and fascinating was there's no such thing as no rule fight, right? As Vale Tudo, because that in and of itself is a rule. So it's
no, you're right.
It throws further down this rabbit hole.
Right. I mean, I guess people want the idea of like, hey, we really want to simulate gladiatorialism. But we don't want, imagine if everyone's a fan of, let's take Chuck Liddell, put him back in there. Everybody loves the Iceman. This guy's in there. He's doing things and everything. But then someone comes up and Chuck loses and he's gone. There's no more Chuck Liddell. He lost.
Yeah.
He's gone.
And this is the permanent issue. No rules would be the purest art form, but we cannot have that because we don't want people getting killed. And so that dichotomy will always exist. And so we just have to find the best that we can. I remember asking Rory McDonald, and Rory McDonald, and Rich, you've worked with Rory. He's not only a brilliant martial artist, he's a bit of a lunatic too. Right? and Rory, I've known him through different phases of his life. He's changed a lot, as we all do. This maybe will be a topic, right? Martial arts, a lifelong journey. Look how I did that. That's just,
it's good segue.
You know?
Just smooth.
Yeah, it just happened, right? But so we all change, we change over time. Early Rory was literally a guy who, if he was born in a different time, would be bare-chested with a flaming sword on a horseback at the front of the army, right? And that's who he would be. Later, through, different beliefs, religion, family, children, all the things that change a human, he was a different guy. But I remember at one point saying to Rory, he's like, I just wish there were less rules. I wish it was purer. And I said, well, how do you sort of come to grips with that? That, it isn't as free as you want. And he goes, well, Robin, I mean, it's still pretty violent. He sort of, it was a simple point. It's like, could it be freer and more pure? Of course it could. But you know what? Where we are with boxing, kickboxing, karate, Muay Thai, all of these martial arts, even competitive jiu-jitsu, people get they're deeply injured, badly injured. It's pretty violent still. But here's one of the things. I don't necessarily think the three of us and many of the people watching here are watching fighting for, quote, the violence. I think the violence is an incidental, unavoidable part of the competitive art. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. Came for the technique, the skill, stayed for the violence.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think that's fair enough.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
I was going to say just to everybody that may have just joined in and everything. This is Robin Black. To my right, that's right, great analyst. If you've never followed any of the stuff out there, get yourself a browser and go Google Robin Black. Look at his great 1-minute breakdowns. Hanging out below is Rich Tao. Rich is a fantastic matchmaker, jiu-jitsu guy himself. And we are having a great discussion about all things martial arts here. We're specifically on the topic of, MMA fighting, this, that, and the other. Yeah. But we will have a lot of that. We are monitoring the comments that are coming up. Some of them get put up, just like a certain one right here. So the show is interactive. Feel free to comment on the show and join the conversation.
Yep, and we'll definitely ask for advice because this is new, and we'll be asking this isn't even the real name of this podcast.
No,
we literally and we started to, because we hang out and chat about fighting, and Mel has done a ton of work, and I've done a little for sportmartialarts.com, but literally when we were like black belt, when we were all growing up, this is what we read. Like what we could hang out with their audience. That was a part of why we sort of wanted to do this. I'll bring up a couple of these in just a second, but there was a question that was here, and we should chat about it for a second. And this is the root of actually something we've talked about. Is mixed martial arts the best of all fighting skills put together to become one? And I think actually the simple answer is no, absolutely not. And I know that sounds maybe contrary or like I'm being a contrarian, but I think, bear with me for a second. I was watching a film. My wife is having our first child. And we were watching a film made in like the 60s where they were showing like how to get ready for a pregnancy. And we were with a bunch of other people online, and somebody was like, look how old and weird and rudimentary and retro that looks. And suddenly it occurred to me, what we're doing right now, the videos being made right now about pregnancy or fighting or whatever, in 20 years will look just as ridiculous as that video looked to us yesterday when we saw it. I was like, when you look at the UFC or Bellator or the Glory or Karate Combat, anything, in 2031, it'll look old and ridiculous. And the way that they fight will look the way that old boxers look like this. So all it is a stop on the evolutionary tree. It isn't the best of everything put together and here we are. It's a little tiny stop on the lifelong journey, not just of the individual, but of any art form itself. Am I getting crazy here, or is this making sense?
Hey, Richard, go ahead, and I'll come up after the third, but go ahead.
I'm processing everything you just dropped on us, Robin, and I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it. I think you're onto something there with that, and that was a big bomb, though. I got to be honest.
It's a lot to break down.
Yeah, I might have to circle back with you on this. I'm going to be doing on it for a minute, but the initial thought is, I'm feeling it, man.
Yeah, wherever we are in anything, we often feel like this is some destination. And we'll look at old black and white movies and go, oh man, I was old and weird. And we'll look at old cars and look at those retro. Everything we have now will look dated, old, rudimentary, formulaic, ancient. It all will. It always has, and it always will. And how we feel about modern MMA or modern boxing or modern music or modern broadcasting is how people in 1962 also felt, and 1923 also felt. We're just a stop on this long, ever-changing organism that, in this case, we're talking about fighting, but this is true of all things. And it's a weird thought when it suddenly hits you. This isn't a place. It's just a little stop on the way somewhere.
And perhaps these certain stops, I think, along the way on this journey, you understand, as you gain more knowledge and different understanding, and you look back, maybe you weren't ready to understand something at a certain time. And I'll explain what I mean with a personal reference and example here. When I first got into jiu-jitsu, MMA, and just this whole fighting concept, I really turned my back on the traditional martial arts, because you saw the Gracies in action and whatnot, and you saw these guys getting their asses kicked, right? You saw the early UFCs, the style versus style, and you saw this dominant style. You saw this style come out on top, where all these traditional martial artists were just getting choked out and armbarred and getting their asses kicked, right? So you kind of just that stuff wasn't useful, right? From that perspective, from that competition perspective. So, get rid of that and absorb and adopt what is useful. Now, I've been in the MMA business, in the fight world in some way, shape, or form for the last 20 years, basically my adult life. And now I guess I'm at this point now, and I'm looking back and perhaps why do I appreciate the purists, the old school guys more today when I didn't in the beginning? Maybe it's because I'm finally ready to. Does that make sense? Now, after all this time, be 42 in a couple of weeks, maybe now I finally get it. So it wasn't them, it was me, just for all these things. Like, going back to how I started, this with that rant about, what is it with this fascination of always, going back to the past for me now? And the old school guys capture my attention, the old school themes, the teams, I should say, the old school guys. I know they just don't make them like they used to. And I'm damn it, I feel like I'm sounding like an old dude, like I don't want to be. Like, turn that music down, it's too loud, and I just don't get it. And I'm, and I certainly don't want to turn into that guy. And that's kind of what I'm grappling with, pun intended, is like, all right, what's up with this fascination and this desire to go back? And maybe I'm finally ready for it. Maybe it took me this long to finally appreciate it and understand it. So I don't know. Sorry.
So I got Mallory. You go ahead. I'll hold on to this thought.
Sure thing. I got a couple of things here. I think you're right in terms of your analysis of it, Robin, and the actual answer is right over here from the comment by this currently up on the screen. It is evolution. I think you cannot measure what you put into an MMA cake by there's no measurement. You can't just take 20% boxing, 2% Muay Thai, 30% jiu-jitsu, because everybody's going to mix in something different. Everybody's going to say, let's put more boxing, let's put more wrestling. And the fact that you have to evolve as an artist in itself, I mean, look at fighters when they start their career versus how they ended their career, how they changed, what they've added, what they thought, what they discovered. One of the things I came up with a couple of weeks ago that was really interesting during the Olympic coverage, I was looking at all the highlights, during my time because it was in Japan, and I stumbled across something that was really interesting. It showed all the sprinting from the first Olympic Games, as much film as they had, to the modern games. And you look at the times. The first sprinters were cracking 100 meters at 14 seconds. Then it was 13. Then it was 11. Then it was 10. And it just narrowed down. And the fact that people have changed the way we've changed, for if we're just thinking of a sprinter, like, well, his legs have to be strong. He has to be very fast. Well, now these guys are lifting weights. They're stretching. They're peaking. And this is a journey along the way that you can only look at in your time. We can look to the past for knowledge and the beginnings and roots, especially things of martial arts. We cannot imagine the future because we haven't gotten there yet.
That's right.
But we use today to build that, to get to the future.
Big time. I haven't seen what you're talking about specifically, but one of the things that is interesting about it is that the times that you see the improvements do start to slow down, but they continue. And every now and again, there's a giant breakthrough.
There's a leap.
Innovation happens or a breakthrough happens. At each one, as we start to get to a point, will all sort of the people around, the consumers, the people, the stakeholders in fighting or sprinting or tech or wherever will say, well, we've almost reached the human capacity. We've almost got the most that we're going to get. Yeah, but they thought that in 1958 as well. And they thought that in 2011 as well. And they'll think it in 2040. We are nowhere near the limitations of where we're going to be able to expand, how we'll be able to think, how we'll be able to learn, what we're going to do, how things change, right? And that's kind of the cool part of it. That's a really, really exciting part of it. But if we get stuck, and I feel like when somebody asked about sort of MMA, and it's just one of the big things that of how people are consuming martial arts today, it's a bit of a sticking point. It's a bit of a plateau. We're kind of stuck in a place where we have the same conversations. We use a lot of the same language to discuss it. Even the coaches, when you hear a coach in the corner, they start talking in a language knowing that they're mic'd, that the audience understands. If they're talking like that in the gym, they're not innovating with language. And if you're not innovating with language, you're not innovating with thinking. And if you're not innovating with thinking, you're not in it. So we're kind of stuck in the mud a little bit there. But ultimately, we'll continue to change, learning from the old. And I know I'm rambling, but there's one other thought from what Rich said, is we're often looking for new things. So if I wanted to land a punch on Mallory or land a strike on Mallory, what if I use something new? That might work. But just as good as new is what if I use a technique that is forgotten, right? Same thing. As long as it may be new to you, but if it was forgotten, it's there. And that goes right back to what Rich was saying. There are things we used to do when you were a white belt, they said, don't cross your legs when you're doing an arm bar. You can't finish a guillotine with the arm in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those things have changed and some of them will work again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Mallory, you just like to comment on what you said earlier about the sprinters and how, they're looking at the evolution and this journey. And I think about how, and then you, Robin, mentioning, coaches and how the game has changed. Everyone's become an athlete now, right? I mean, I think that's a huge part of the evolution of MMA is, 20 years ago and even further, it was like, beyond that, it was like kind of the Babe Ruth era. What did he say? I did it on hot dogs and beer or something like that. And these days, you have several coaches, like you mentioned, Robin, that it's not just one head coach and we just train and we do some road work. It's like, no, I have a strength and conditioning coach. I have a stretching coach, a specialist for everything now. Right. And then next thing you know, there's like eight people, 8 experts, 8 coaches that a fighter has now. You're a true athlete, and I think it's been fascinating how that's changed the game.
Let me throw this up. Let me add this, because when we all think like athletes, we're sticking hard one way, and we're to be more athletic, to run plays better, to be more X's and O's, to be more ABCs, to be more 1, 2, 3s. You got to be less do re mi's, right? And that's where, again, this modern yin and yang is maybe being tipped heavily one way with the modern interpretation of commercial fighting.
One thing that I wanted to chime in with is one of the best benefits that I had when I was teaching is, especially when you're teaching young children, and you would say, okay, I want your left foot to be placed right here. I want your right foot to go in this direction, and I want you to do this. And during class, one of the students would say, why? And, instead of just saying, oh, because it's tradition, and you have to go through and you have to think, okay, well, the reason why we do it this way is because of A, B, C, D, and also demonstrating that. But it's the questions that you're getting from those kids that make you start to think different. And sometimes you need someone to think different for that evolution to happen. A perfect example of it, going back to the Olympics again, look at the high jump. Before we did any high jumping, guys were just jumping over a bar, just leaping over it. And then a guy named Fosbury comes along and says, I'm going to jump over that backwards. And I'm pretty sure the first time he said that, everyone kind of looked at him strange, like, how are you going to do that? This is where I can maximize the potential of my quadriceps by jumping over, arching my back, going along the surface of the bar, and I'll clear a height higher than I could before just by straight leaping over it. That changed everything. And one guy thinking different, it changed the entire sport.
Jiu-jitsu was that. Like Royce Gracie, UFC 1 was that. So, and actually this brings us back to something Rich was talking about. Rich, now we're maybe old enough to actually appreciate some of these, interesting things from before, right? What if your appreciation of catch wrestling or karate or any of these sort of, doctrines that you didn't appreciate more, once jiu-jitsu was new, so it worked. If I don't know what you're doing and you can do something I don't understand, you'll win. Once we all started to understand it, it actually elevated the importance of karate. It elevated the importance of the jousting element to it. It elevated the importance of using your feet and switching stances and overwhelming with possibilities and all these things. It wasn't that it was less important. It was temporarily less important because we were all suddenly like, I better learn to do that or I'm going to get beat. Once we all learned to do that, it was like, well, now that we're all even again, what can I get good at that you're actually not that good at? And Mal, I don't know if I was with you or not. Maybe I wasn't. But Rich, who's ATT's ATT's not head coach, but runs it?
The owner?
Yeah.
Dan Lambert.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah.
So I was doing commentary with Dan Lambert, and for Jorge Masvidal's bare knuckle MMA show, and Dan was like, hey man, I've been in this business for a couple of decades, and I never thought I would see the day where karate is clearly more important in MMA than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he's not the only guy who said it. That's at this exact moment in time, that's a somewhat truthful statement.
Yeah. The footwork, that we've seen how guys struggle with the MVPs, the Wonder Boys, and the Raymond Daniels style, right? It's a lot to deal with, and if you're not, if you haven't studied that art, you could be waking up with your back on the canvas, being the ref wondering,
what happened.
So yeah, Robin, that's a powerful statement, and it's very accurate.
What, Rich, the guy that Michael Venom Page knocked out last with the head kick, the little skip head kick, he is a top 10 ranked.
Derek Anderson?
Yeah. Yes, Derek Anderson, fantastic fighter.
Yeah, broke his nose, and Derek certainly didn't quit.
No,
but he was unable to continue. That's for sure.
So that if you really look at it, and you're being honest and unbiased, the way Michael fought with him in those moments was not that different from how Hoist Gracie defeated people. You felt helpless and unable to compete in an arena where somebody had a level of mastery that you had a level of competence, right? Derek is an excellent fighter, an excellent top 10 ranked guy, a good wrestler, striker, all these kind of things, categories that we use. But in a particular type of fighting, Michael had a level of mastery that could make it so that you didn't quite know what to do. It's not really that different than when Hoist did that to people at UFC 1 and 2.
Yeah, you're right. And what's even makes it even a little more fascinating to mention is the fact that it's been around for a long time. No one knew what jiu-jitsu was when Hoist came out with it. We've had karate for thousands of years.
1,000 years.
We're just looking at it differently, right? It's evolved as we've been, going back to that, and kind of the themes that have emerged and developed from this expression.
So if you think about it, so you're right. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is introduced. We don't even know what it is.
Right.
But then karate comes along and we're like, I do know what that is. But Michael, and there's others, Raymond, and there's people that'll be doing this with other particular lines of thinking. They don't have to be categorized as boxing or karate. But if you develop a level of mastery that is almost so different than someone's understanding, it's almost as if they don't know what it is again. It's similar.
Right. And time out, guys. I have to, we've left out a very, very big name in this whole thing, and I want to apologize to him, a guy that I really love chatting with. It's Lyoto.
Oh, yes.
He climbed the mountain. He achieved more than all of those great karate practitioners have in the world of MMA. He was a world champion. So sorry, Lyoto.
Yeah. So I got to work with Lyoto, and tomorrow night, depending on when you watch this, I'll be on Karate Combat with him again. So, Rich, you know him well. I didn't know him that well. I've sat and chatted with him.
You should apologize to him.
Yeah, I know. But when I was around him for the first few Karate Combat, he was just so wise. Like, he's like a different type of person. Like, he's like his philosophical understanding, connection to the moment is so elevated. It felt like a different type of human,
Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. It's here's another pop culture reference. You guys remember White Men Can't Jump?
Yes. Woody Harrelson, Wesley Snipes.
Yes. When they're talking about Jimi, right? Jimi Hendrix, when he's telling him, I believe, was it you're listening but you're not hearing?
You're not hearing, yes. You can't hear Jimmy.
Right. You're listening, but you don't hear him. You're not hearing Jimmy. Maybe we're starting to hear, after all these years and all this exposure and to different, fighting styles playing out in the cage and in the ring for us to observe and dissect. Maybe we're finally starting to hear it. I don't know.
It's a different, like you said, it's not only evolution for the art, but it's evolution for oneself. And just to throw things into a different perspective, we limit. Rob and I agree with you completely. We limit ourselves when we select a style and a box to put ourselves in. Paige is actually a Laogar Kung Fu practitioner, not necessarily karate. Michael Venom Page, Laogar Kung Fu. Yes. Yeah, wow. Most people would say karate. There it is, karate. Sports karate. And that's so therefore, if we put things in a box and you say, just like you said that, hey, you and I are sparring, I'm like, watch out for Robin's left high kick. I'm watching out. So I've well scouted that. And that I know that that's a good kick of yours and I'm waiting for it. Why not try something completely different since I'm looking left and you hit me right? Because I'm looking for that. So go with something old instead of the well-trodden path. The one of the more interesting things that I find is when you're sparring someone that is well versed. You guys spar. I mean, maybe it's somebody that you grew up in the dojo with, and you know what his specialty or her specialty is. He or she knows the same thing. So you limit yourself. You're like, I'm not going to do that because it's not going to work on this person. And they're having the same conversation. And sometimes it's the person that takes the slight risk to do something different is the one that succeeds and gets to the point first or scores or knocks you out or takes you down or whatever it is, whatever it is, because you're not thinking on the same thing over again.
The I could kick you in the head and you know it. So you will work in such a way to avoid that. And I know that. So now I'm not going to throw it. And you know that I'm not going to throw it. So now I throw it. Reverse psychology. Right? That shit is happening within so many moments of fights. We still, and I do this for a living, I talk about fighting on TV and the internet for a living. And I swear the more I look at it and the more I try to challenge myself to be truthful, the more I realize we're literally, if fighting is astronomy, we're literally doing astrology. Like what we're saying just isn't real. It's not factual. He doesn't have a big right hand. It isn't a striker versus a grappler. He doesn't have crazy knockout power in both hands. These are all just astrology. They're all just sayings. They don't have any root in truth. The real, at the high level, when I say, oh my God, Khabib has a beautiful double leg takedown, it's just the same double leg takedown he's been doing since he was 6 years old. It's not a beautiful double leg takedown. He's a beautiful artist expressing genius in a very rudimentary, very basic double leg takedown that he's been doing since he was 5.
There's nothing different about it.
It would be like sitting there watching Prince play on a stage and saying, oh, Prince has a beautiful guitar, such a beautiful guitar. No, it's just a guitar. It's just a double leg takedown. It's not beautiful. That's astrology. What's really happening is, although when I try to do a double leg takedown, I may have to think about putting my knee down, how my hands grab, the elbows come in, hips up high, chest to the sky. When he moves and bases out, I'll have to turn the corner. And if, as a commentator or an analyst, I just talk about that, I'm just saying nonsense, because none of that has anything to do with Khabib's process. It's so chunked in his neurology that he doesn't think about any of that. That's automatic. It's the subtleties of reverse psychology, telling lies, reacting to you, manipulating your thinking, making you nervous. These are the things that high-level martial artists do. And the more I look into it, and this maybe is a topic for another day, but the more I look into it, the weird, old, ancient martial arts ideas about space and time and being able to attack before the person moves and all of these things actually are neurologically supported the deeper you look into what's actually happening. But that's this is my job over the next 10 years to try to make sense of that for people who watch fighting. And
it's, I think what you have a great point there. How many highlight moments in fights were we potentially robbed at because someone just said, hey, this isn't going to work? Look at football, for example. Tom Brady's back. Tom Brady's got weapons to his left. He's got weapons to his right. He's hoping his lineman keep the line going. He's got a running back in the back. But all of a sudden, if he knows there's a lockdown corner over there to the left, people will say, well, you can't throw it to the left side of the field because that guy's going to intercept the ball or whatever. So what do? You cut the field in half, and that team certainly knows it. It says, okay, well, we're gonna go on this other side of the field. So who's going to risk greatness in terms of someone says, hey, look, you're fighting Mirko Krokop. So the first thing I think of it is getting kicked in the head with, I think it was Rogan, right leg hospital, left leg cemetery. That said that.
That goes, it predates Joe even. That's Morrow and
there's so much there. But you come in, you know who you're facing. You're like, okay, well, I guess this is out of the plan. This is out of the plan. And then we see him get head kicked by
by a jiu-jitsu black belt.
A guy who I didn't even know could kick. I knew him.
Saga.
Yes.
Yeah. There you go, man.
No.
And who has talked themselves out of that in that moment right before that KO? Man, I should really throw this. And then that part of your brain, or maybe there's a coach. Hey, that's not going to work.
This is life, though. There's all.
This is true.
Who knows the girl you didn't ask out? I mean, we're all happily married, and we couldn't be. If our wives are watching, they're the greatest ever. But they actually, we the three of us do all talk about how much we love our families. But you don't know who you didn't ask out when you were 20. that you were nervous about asking out. That those are human babies that could have been born that are different, that would have changed the world and killed Hitler, and who knows? These are the things you do and don't do, the things you question, and the things you hesitate on doing. Don't just change a fight; they change your life every single day, and they drive you crazy if you think about them.
You can't overthink the future, or else you won't do anything. You just, what about if I make this left-hand turn at the wrong time and there's someone running the red light? Well, analysis paralysis. You're too scared to do anything. But the future is whatever you make it. Make it a good one. Thank you, Doc Brown from Back to the Future films. We have to live and go forward. I had a ton of entertainment knowledge in my head that's useless. So that'll come out every once in a while.
You can't get caught up playing that game. Whether you're for life and for training, for your journey in martial arts, right? Just can't.
No, you can't. This is a really interesting comment. I've used Wing Chun in a clinch. If we're fortunate enough to continue to have people who want to hang out with us, and we keep getting to do this podcast, and before we go today, we'll ask for your advice on things. Thanks for hanging, by the way, everybody. It's just really cool. But this will be a topic that keeps coming up. Is this statement is 100% true, but also not true, because although when you are in someone's guard, that's almost basically Wing Chun. If you train Wing Chun, inside safest, inside fastest, outside safest. These principles all work within. I'm sitting in your guard and I'm striking you. This is all, of course, it's all the same thing. But it's like I said, is this jab boxing or Muay Thai, or is it karate, or is it Wing Chun? All of it's just doctrines and dogma, right? It is 100% true that Wing Chun is used every single MMA, not every single, but 17 out of 20 MMA fights, there are techniques that are truly ancient Wing Chun techniques that are used against the fence or in someone's guard all day long. But also at the same time, you could call them 1,000 other things. And these are just words, right? These are just words.
Yeah. If you get punched by a punch, as you're getting hit, are you thinking that was a Taekwondo punch, or was a Shotokan punch, or was a boxer's jab, or was this, that? It was a punch as it landed. The origin does not matter. The destination did.
If you're Greek or Korean or, South American, Peruvian, you'll call it a different word.
Right.
You'll use a different word. Right.
This is an interesting question that's on screen right now.
Rich, you do jiu-jitsu a few times a week at least.
Yeah.
You do it different than everybody you roll with, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, there are a few reasons for that. Body type, I think, is a big part of it. I'm 6'3", I'm pretty long, so a certain game and certain techniques are better. And that's the other thing that going back to why I love martial arts and jiu-jitsu in particular, creativity, man. I can create my own style. What works for me. I'm 6'3". Some of the guys I train with are smaller, and they may want to play they have to play a different game. You're 5'10", you can't play, I like to play Spider, De La Hiva, and that guard. Other guys are more half guard or don't want to play guard at all, want to be on top. So it's just, it's I do it differently than the other guys I train with, for sure. And my coach is aware of that. And, he's helping me create a style that works for me.
That's why this question, I like it. It's your identity. This is your combat identity, your martial identity. It's different. Somebody is like, Rich does jiu-jitsu and he boxes sometimes and he's a brown belt. He won't be like any other one. And I know it must be cool. We're going to talk about it another day, a time more, but you do Wimp to Warrior. So you have people that have never done martial arts, right?
Correct.
That train for a year, 6 months. How long do they train?
20 weeks, fighting? Actually. 20 weeks. So it's a
5 months.
Yes, it's a program developed for the average person, the everyday person who has never.
It's cool.
it's such a unique and fascinating group of people that we attract. Some are fans of MMA and want to learn more and they're very curious, and others don't even watch, don't care. They're just they want the challenge of training for 20 weeks and at the culmination of that 20 weeks participating in a finale, which is an amateur fight. So there are people that you would never expect to. There have been a couple of grandmothers that have gone through the program and fought. There was a grandmother, I saw her fight in Montana a few months ago at the SBG.
How did she do?
Finale. She lost a decision, but it was her second amateur fight. She knew what she was doing. She was in control. She had technique. It was fun to watch, blew my mind. And, to take it even a step further, it's like she has more MMA experience than practically, and this is no knock on them. It's just more to elevate her, but she has more MMA experience than like every MMA journalist out there that's credentialed. That we're listening to tell us what's going on in a fight, that we're listening to tell us who the next guy is or girl is, the next great fighter is. We're listening to these guys, and this grandmother in Montana has more technical knowledge and more fight experience than they do. So again, that's not to, diminish the journalists, because they have their strengths and whatnot. It's more to speak on the amazing skills and this journey that this grandmother has taken on, amongst several others. There have been 10,000 people that have gone through this
10,000?
Yes, globally, this human transformation gone through this program. And it's fascinating. And if you've always wondered if you've always been curious about martial arts training, I think this is a perfect way to, because what we do is we create the perfect environment with a really great curriculum and a starting point. Real quick, if you and I take somebody to go train at our hometown gyms and academies, you're kind of at the mercy of what is being taught at that moment, right? It may not be what you need to learn on day one. You could be way down. This is going to be over your head for a while until you kind of figure it out, which you may not, because it,
can discourage you or whatever.
With it, right? So it's a great curriculum to start from, and also it's the perfect environment to put you in with other beginners as well, because we all know what happens. Sometimes you get thrown into a group of guys that are advanced, and bad things can happen.
Or young,
traumatized, and how many times have we heard our friends tell us, "Man, I went in one day, this dude, this hurt me, and I'm done."
And you're sad. I heard that so often.
One of the reasons I even brought that up was when we were talking about identity. You've been doing martial arts for your adult life, so you've developed one. But in 20 weeks, these people who went from they didn't do any to 20 weeks later, they are competing at amateur. They all have different identities too, don't they?
Yeah.
They all know how to do a leg kick, but they all express fighting differently as an individual.
Yes. It's fascinating to see what you do with this amazing art, right? With this amazing set of skills. What's your interpretation of it? What's your expression of it, right? And Bruce, I forget the exact, ultimately martial arts is like it's expression, right?
It's self-expression.
So I'm going to, the program, and like many great coaches, teaches you how to properly throw a kick, right?
Yeah.
But then how do what do you add? What does the grandmother do that the 24-year-old guy who maybe aspires to be a pro fighter one day, how does he do it? How does
But the thoughtful person does it in a particular way, and the aggressive person, and the scared person, and the confident person, and the tall person, and the short person, and the person who has it really is so fascinating. Like, even in 10 weeks, 10 people do martial arts who learn the same curriculum will do martial arts in 10 different ways.
Yes.
You know?
And we call it the ultimate human transformation, but it can also be looked upon as like the ultimate human experiment. Right?
Yeah.
Let's take all these people who some have never even seen MMA. They've never had any interest. They're in this for other reasons, maybe more spiritual. It's so terrifying. They want to conquer those fears. But, you take all these different people, different backgrounds, different, as you mentioned, different identities. You teach them the same thing. It's not all going to come out the same way.
Yeah. What you're exactly, hitting on is that not everybody's going to be a clone. We're all born individuals. We have our unique characteristics. Just to focus on, like Rich, I've never met you in person. You're 6'3". I am short. I'm 5'6". So the techniques that I use have to be modified for me. I can't say I'm going to grow a foot tomorrow. I'm going to be taller when I wake up tomorrow. As much as I want that to happen, it's not going to happen. So I have to be comfortable in this 5'6" body. I have to figure out what advantages do I bring to the table if we are sparring. What can I do to maximize this frame that I'm in? I'm not going to grow overnight. This is not going to happen. Sure, I could put on more muscle. I can add more skill. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to be 5'6" on a good day.
You could be lighter. You could be heavier.
Heavier.
So you may raise an interesting point about how we look at fighting and how we look at the world, how we look at everything, how we look at our job and anything. When if I'm doing my job and it gets to this thing they call the tail of the tape, which I've said this many times, but can't believe they still call it that. Some guy came up with that in 1951. And if you told his grandchildren that he came up with it, they still use it, they'd be shocked, right? No more innovation came. Ritualistically, we have to call it this forever. There's no other way we can do it. But if we look at that, and then I'm working with a good play-by-play guy, they may say, and you'll notice this guy has a 78-inch reach, and the other guy has a 69-inch reach. So there's a 9-inch reach advantage. That's not an advantage. It's just a difference.
Yeah.
John Dodson is 5 feet, or maybe 4'10". I don't know. There's not many other examples. Spud Webb, the basketball player, he didn't have a height disadvantage. He had to jump higher. He was built different. It wasn't a disadvantage because you could reach higher, but he could jump higher. It was just a balance of who he was. When John Dodson fights somebody and they have 6 inches longer of reach, they don't have a 6-inch reach advantage. He fights this way. He's good at this. He has an advantage because you aren't used to fighting somebody who fights like him. He is used to fighting someone who fights like you. He's used to people with that length. So it isn't the term disadvantage is something we use in our minds. There are people Rich's height who weigh 60 pounds heavier. They'd be like, they have a 60-pound weight advantage. Weight is important, but they may not be able to use spider guard because they're too big. They're built different. These aren't advantages. They're simply differences. And I use this. Nick, he's got one arm.
Nick Newell, right?
Nick Newell. Yes. And we've had Nick. Nick's a friend. I've commentated Nick's fighting. And Nick tucked his arm into a choke. And then it was this arm. I forget. So he tucked this arm. And then with the other. So he has a different arm. That different arm is shaped that it ends here. He took that piece and he tucked that in. And the guy went up to reach 2 hands on one to escape it, and there was no one.
There's nothing to grab.
Now you tell me that's a disadvantage. He's just different. It wasn't a disadvantage in that moment. You could call it an advantage if you like, but it was different. You went to grab the thing that's always there, that is a part of the process of breaking this thing. And this one individual who is different than others, you couldn't do it. And I remember the moment I saw that, and then they showed in the slow motion and the guy's reaching up to do it. Yeah. And I said it in the broadcast. I'm like, try to tell me that this man is somehow disadvantaged. He's just different. And it was so revealing to me. And it was so exciting to me. And that's true of all of us. Now, you don't have a height disadvantage over Rich. You just are that tall.
Right. You have to learn to fight the frame that you're in. And just as you mentioned, for me, I looked at it. I was saying, well, I'm always going to be short. More than likely, I'm always going to fight opponents that are at the very least as tall as me. Well, most likely, everybody's always going to be taller. So I just planned on fighting taller opponents all the time. Versus someone that's of maybe a little bit taller than me, they may fight someone shorter. They may fight someone taller. So they have to be used to fighting that range. Meanwhile, I know that, okay, long legs, sure, deal with them. Long arms, sure, deal with them. I need to be faster. I need to cut sharper angles. I need to do this. I'm fighting for me, not for them. And that's an excellent point, you know? And also the thing is, it may be a flexibility issue too. When you got longer legs and longer arms you're dealing with, if your hips aren't flexible, if your knees aren't flexible, you can't, like everyone always, I'll just use the term, you can't pull rubber guard because you just don't have that flexibility.
Your hips don't do that.
Your hips don't move that way.
Eddie Bravo in a book, and I'm training with Eddie in LA at his academy, and then him saying, and I don't know if he was being prejudiced against North Americans. I think he was just making a point, but he was like, in North America, we will say, I'm not that flexible. But in many other parts of the world, we'll just train our flexibility more. Right? It may not, in his example, that it was a North American thing. I live in Canada. You guys live in America. We're neighbors. That it was an us thing. Maybe he was incorrect, but it's a certain us thing anywhere in the world. Some of us think this is the totality of what we're going to be. However good I play piano now, that's as good as I'll ever play. Some of us think we're fixed quantities, and others are like, well, I can't do the splits, but if I worked at it, I could do the splits. And that's true.
That is true. Yeah. It, depending on where you want to limit. You want to limit yourself mentally. Obviously there are physical limitations. I'm not going to be an NFL player. That's physical. I can't. But if I wanted to go out and teach myself calculus or this, that, and the other, I could do that if I apply and try harder. There are going to be some walls. There was a conversation I had with my 13-year-old. I don't like math. I said, you don't like math because you don't understand the rules. But once you understand the rules, you're going to love it. And now she's in advanced mathematics courses. And I said, you told me that. We had that conversation. But it was the limitation you put on yourself before. It's hard. And I think there's a great saying that goes, once you found out something is hard, what you do next determines what type of person you are. We're all going to hit brick walls. We're all going to hit sudden stops. But what do you do then? Are you on this side of the wall or are you on top of the wall going over to the next challenge?
Dig it.
Well, boys, it seems like martial arts is life, isn't it? And it's really helping us stay fit, help us get, just tackle real life problems off the mat. And just it can be applied to just about everything. And I know different athletes and different what is the other expression? Ball is life. And, I get it. And
I get it.
But, no, man, martial arts is life. Really.
I agree with that.
Yeah. If you can figure out how to reverse a half guard when you can't breathe out of your nose, you can figure out how to handle a setback at work. And some of the process will be the same.
Yeah.
I get it. We're going to do this. Let's try to do this literally at the same time next week. But, we were going to do 90 minutes. We're getting into that realm. We can hang out longer by all means. But we do want to ask people, we're going to have guests, right? Rich?
Yes.
Well, we're going to have guests, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And then segments. Okay, so that was something we were talking about. We're not going to, hang on this too long, but, wrestlers' threat to judo, right? 1970, this. 1970. And, these are not new concepts. We'll often be watching, modern sport fighting. And some of these things are these are cycles of things. There's another one in here, Dan Inosanto, and that's a guest we got to try to have. I know he doesn't do a lot of stuff, but we got to, I will not speak, I promise, the whole time. I just want to, power without strength, but there's a Dan Inosanto article in here where he spent time in Thailand, and he's like, and this was in the 70s, late 70s, I believe, or early 80s. And now we looked at this one together before, and he was like, these leg kick things, man. We got to figure this out. They're damaging, you know, the way we're doing our fighting right now. Like, I went to Thailand and these guys just kicked the crap out of my legs. We got to figure this thing out. And I'll find that one for next time because it's fantastic.
That is so foreshadowing for the major. You know, if you think about it, it's just like, what, kick legs? We're not doing it. And then all of a sudden you get a guy over here and it changes, it radically changes your thinking in terms of go in there and get your leg kicked off one time. And then you're thinking, okay, hold on. If I'm going to continue to do this, I got to adapt. You know, there is a shift right there. And I like how he was calling for that so many years ago.
Yeah. But as I'll turn it over to you guys and to the audience, like, so they can some guests. Like, we got to get Boss Rutan, we got to get Lyoto Machida, we got to get George St. Pierre. You know, we got to get some of these real martial arts nerds, but outside the box. We'd also like to chat with some artists, right?
Yeah,
You know, a rapper or a painter or, you know, these types of things too, right?
I would like to kind of bring surfing into it. I'm a jiu-jitsu surf guy, and surfing, just that form of expression, you know, the old school guys I talk to there, just very similar takes, you know, on competitive surfing versus freestyle surfing, soul surfing. I think they're, you know, some of the purists there are having a very similar conversation. But yeah, all forms of art where you can express yourself through sport and just creating. Yeah, let's talk to them. I think at its core, we're all doing the same thing, aren't we?
Yeah.
Expressing ourselves and creating.
And also the idea behind it is pushing oneself, whether this is sport-wise or I think we were kind of thinking about this earlier. Let's say music-wise. Let's look at going, because I love rap. Look at Sugar Hill versus Ludacris. The different style of creating music, simple beat throws, and then guys saying, "Okay, no, I'm going to put this much into that much rhyme into this much space," and you could hear every single word. It's you know, the perfect thing. You mentioned Prince before. Think of you know, Prince telling him. You know, teaching himself all these different, you know, instruments. Or I've seen video before. One time somebody was at the House of Blues and he saw Prince on the side of the stage and he was vibing with the show. The first thing that guitarist did is take off his guitar and gave it to Prince. Please enlighten us. Show us, you know, can you imagine, like, I'm not worth here. Take this.
Please.
And show us.
And even new technologies, the way that they affect artists. Surfers, fighting. You know, fighting is a technology in its own way. These are all things that we'll talk about. But yes, because we're so stoked that we're on Black Belt, as well as Sport Martial Arts and other places, we're going to dig into these because that'll be super fun. So when we say, you know, ideas for segments, I just think that's cool. Like, I'll read, or Amal has a collection. We'll just read a little bit of an old one and take the things. A segment idea I would love to do, you know, the UFC in particular is very, very weird about using their footage. But when I go back and look at old fights, there's things that people would do that were correct that are now considered wrong that will later be correct again. And being able to look at some of this footage is something we could do in the future. You know, if anybody has any ideas for, right now we literally called this For Love of Martial Arts. If you have any ideas of what would be a more permanent title, let us know, or maybe that is the permanent title. If you have any ideas for guests, let us know. I do like this, and even maybe as a segment, a Forgotten Master segment, where like one of us will bring in one. That would be really fun.
That's huge. Yeah. It's kind of to speak to this. I was running around in Vegas a couple of years ago. We were trying to get into the MGM, and they told us to go to this door. This door was locked, and we're running around. And I'm just like, wait a minute, the show's supposed to start. And I look to my left, and it's Benny the Jet who can't get in with me. And I'm sitting like, if he can't get in, I got no shot of getting in. I'm like, I had to call somebody on the phone because we're supposed to be doing the show, blah, blah. But an incredibly cool guy. We just had this exchange. I was like, sir, just, you know, like I had to do everything to stop from bowing to him. Like, like, I can't believe I'm late for the show, but Benny the Jet to my right. On the other hand, I just wanted to say, that's Benny the Jet right there, but I got 5 minutes to get to stage, and, you know, a freak, that's a guy I'd love to talk to, you know.
Yeah, we could get Benny for sure. There's a guy that maybe people don't know as well as Benny, but Benny certainly knows him, and I believe that they did fight. Jean-Yves Theriault is his name. Jean-Yves brought boxing, like really sophisticated boxing, into long pant, high kicking kickboxing. And he was, his nickname was the Iceman. He is probably considered the greatest long pant kickboxer ever. Duke Rufus actually would be somebody to talk to about a lot of this stuff, Duke, because and we've had Duke on the old things. But guys, any other thoughts? We got time. Like, you know, any thoughts, anything you want to do, anything that you've been thinking about to tease for when we get together next week?
Let's see. I like the idea of breaking down footage. Everybody loves exactly what you do, but I really like the idea of what was, hey, this was wrong. We were told it was right, and then all of a sudden it's wrong. And now one day it would be right again. It reminds me of kind of like, we have 9 planets. No, we don't. Pluto's not a planet. Okay, Pluto, you're out. We only have 8 planets. And then now it's like, no, Pluto's a planet again. So what was old is new again. And I like that specific segment, like, you should never do this. And eventually it comes back to where none of this is okay. It's all in the application of doing that. Applying that, like, mentioned to everybody that I think certain techniques, one specific person has been asked about Leglocks.
That's a whole spider web. That's a spider web. We'll get Rich. We'll get Rich to give us some modern thoughts on that too. There's another thing I want to put here for next time. It's I'm writing it here. Truths versus novice truths, and it's an interesting idea. I think because what is true when you're a white belt is not true when you are a purple belt, which is not true when you are a black belt. Some are. Gravity is still real. You need oxygen to survive. Like there are some undeniable truths, but then there are certain other things that are not. And that's, I think, a really interesting thing. We'll save it for next week.
Yeah, I got a lot to say about that. That's great, Robin.
I like maybe a thought of martial arts myths. Something attracted us to the martial arts itself before we took day one of class. Like, I can throw out one that everybody's heard before. Hey, you know, once you become a black belt, you must legally register your hands down at the police department as deadly weapons. How many times have you heard that before? That's been around. That's been, passed along through, urban mythology and everything.
This is a box of worms to open, but I wrote it down for next week or the week after or the next time we get together. When we do that, we'll bring him in. You open a box of worms, a can of worms when you do this, but we'll bring in my friend Rob from McDojo Life.
Hey, that would be amazing. He's built an entire channel off of that. But think about it, an empire, and it just, that stuff, because half truths and somewhat truths spread faster than the truth, and it's like people are like, oh, well, can you really jump over houses like they used to show on Kung Fu? No, hold on. No,
interesting that these, I never thought of it, but these two things actually are very, very attached.
Yes.
Maybe they'll create a theme for us. But this is going to be fun, guys. Going to be super, super fun. Any last thoughts before we? Can we try the same time next week?
I think the same time works perfect for me.
Let's try.
Well, for me.
And anybody that's here, you've literally been here since day one now. So we appreciate you. We really do. It's cool to have a bunch of, what did you say, Rich? Where you suddenly, we are not alone.
We are not alone.
Feeling.
The X-Files for martial arts geeks. Yeah.
Very much so. It's okay. We can talk about this. We have a platform. And if you think about it, we've just spent an hour and 23 minutes talking about an art and arts that we love. There are people that have this conversation all the time. For good friends flying back on a plane, on a train, talking to your friend over this, that, and the other. We're bringing that all here. Love to discuss. And as you guys continue to comment on the page, whether you're watching this later on a rebroadcast or watching on, please include those. We'll be looking at that, and you're going to help build the show. That's going to help us come up with ideas for guests. It's going to be flexible. We're going to work on our flexibility here. We're gonna keep things fresh and everything.
Yeah. Yes, we are. Quote of the week. Okay. Yeah. Quotes are good. Yeah. Lots of great ideas. And we appreciate them all. This has been really fun, guys. This is literally, I think this exceeds my expectation of, like, if you can literally hang out with friends and just talk about martial arts and that's a thing, that's pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, when we all came up with this idea, what do we say? It's either going to be really cool or it's just going to bomb. I think we did all right, fellas. I think this is definitely skewing more towards, pretty cool than we thought.
Yeah.
So
I know one thing.
The jury is still out.
The jury's still out.
But yes.
Let's go read the comments.
After one hang, we are skewing towards cool, but this is still unwritten. So plenty of time to bomb.
Yeah.
This is absolutely true.
It's in the eye of the beholder, right? I guess. So.
That's true.
Super fun. Well, Mal, I'll leave you the last word, but or Rich, if you got anything to say before Mal signs off. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for letting us hang out and talk about martial arts. We didn't have to talk about what's next for whomever or
who versus who
exactly, or whatever that's a conversation for another day. But a lot of the way we even discuss modern commercial fighting was created by promoters to sell a pay-per-view or a television program or whatever. And for a lot of us, we just fall into that and we think that's the way. And it isn't the way. It's a way. We can talk about whatever we want, however we want.
No boundaries here.
Right.
This is the old school. No time limit, guys. No,
no time. We go until we finish.
As a concept, you know what I'm saying? So I hope you other purists, geeks, junkies, however you want to characterize and describe your passion and your identity. Hope you enjoyed this, and let's keep it going.
Well said. I think this actually says it all. I enjoy drinking kombucha and watching this. There's, you know what? Hey, pull up your favorite beverage, pull up a seat, listen to us talk about martial arts. We're going to be back here this time next week. Robin, thank you. Follow Robin Black on all social media platforms, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Rich has got... he's directing us towards Bellator, which has a great event coming up on September 18th. And follow us at sportmartialarts.com and also Sport Martial Arts on Facebook. And most importantly, go down to your local library, 7-Eleven, wherever, grab yourself a copy of Black Belt Magazine. There's a very interesting article on sport karate champions out this month. And we will be veering into some of the classic covers and articles of Black Belt Magazine. Guys, definitely hang around. I'm going to go ahead and close the room. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Rich. Hey, I love you, Mom and Dad, and we'll see you guys soon.
Enjoy the hostilities.